I just returned home from a weekend bikepacking trip here on the South Island of New Zealand. And I was doing a bit of a shakedown trip to get my bikepacking setup going for the summer. And I was realizing that there's a lot of cross utilization between my bikepacking and my backpacking. And then I kind of got into this whole weird thinking hole while I was just riding around about all the things that I use on almost every trip. And I love having a lot of cross utilization in my gear kit, no matter what, because gear is expensive and I want to use the most efficient gear possible. Things that are versatile and I can use on lots of different trips. And kind of turned out that there's about 6 things that I toss in my bag no matter what I'm doing. Whether it's a day hike, that's going to be a long afternoon, essentially anything over 4 hours, bike touring, bike packing, canoeing, through hiking, whatever it is, these 6 things just live in my bag if I'm going out into the backcountry. And through my experience over the years, it's not that I need these things every single time I go out, but when I need them, I really need them. And I'm glad they're in my bag. And every time I've gone out without them, and it turned out that I actually needed it in the end, I am kicking myself. Yvon Chouinard said, "The adventure doesn't begin until everything goes wrong, and that is when the adventure starts." And I found myself in some pretty precarious situations where the adventure really got away from me. And having these things in my bag, or lack thereof, have really made or broke the situation in the first place. I'm sure if you have been hiking for any amount of time, you have been in a situation that has maybe gone a little bit sideways. And eventually, if you're hiking long enough, your number's going to get pulled and you're going to get lost, or a first aid scenario is going to happen, or you're going to run out of food or water or whatever it might be. And these 6 things tend to save the day for me out in the backcountry. And year over year, they just keep ending up in my bag, and various brands or versions. And these are the 6 things that I take out with me on every single hike, no matter what. Let's get into it. The first item that I'm going to take with me on every single trip is this tenacious tape. I bought this small roll on Amazon. I'm going to link this down in the description. It is a small roll of tape. It's very light, very inexpensive. It's great at patching down jackets, rain jackets, tent flies, tent floors, any type of clothing. And it's also a great makeshift bandage where you can rip a piece of clothing and shirt off and make a bandage if you really need it. I've been in a pinch a few times with this tape, and it has saved the day. And it's great. I used to carry a sewing kit or a little stitch kit, and I never use that anymore because the adhesive on this tape is so strong. Alternatively, I will take a bit of duct tape and wrap it around my water bottle a handful of times so I have a bit of duct tape and not a giant, really heavy roll. Or I'll send it around my trekking pole a handful of times. But this particular tape has been a great addition to patch shoes and so on and so forth. And this just lives in my bag. It's super light. So that's one of the things that I take on every single hike is this tenacious tape. It's great for repairs, great for first aid. Sticking in the first aid category, the next thing that I'll take on every trip with me is this pocket knife. This is a mini Swiss Army knife. This one I grabbed from Hyperlite. This has scissors, a knife, a nail file, a flathead screwdriver, toothpick, tweezers. When you need a knife and you don't have one, you are really wishing you brought that. This thing's super tiny. It takes up virtually no space in my bag, and it's great for cutting bandages, doing first aid type things, starting a fire if I need to. If I'm really in a pinch and I don't have a lighter, I can start a fire with a stick and a bow. I learned that way long time ago in Boy Scouts, but you're not going to be able to do that unless you have a knife. It doesn't have to be super sharp. It doesn't have to be super big, but this knife, I've done many little projects with that along the way, and it has been a game changer, and in some case scenarios, a lifesaver. So I kick a tiny Swiss Army knife into my backpack no matter what. Speaking of lighting a fire, the next thing is this lighter. This happens to be just a little camo pink lighter I grabbed at a liquor store here in New Zealand, but it does the job. Whether it's a fire starting kit, a lighter, waterproof matches, you need a way to start a fire. Those magnesium with flint, in the scenario of being very lost, maybe wet, maybe injured, when things start to go a little weird and you just need to get a fire going and cook some dinner or purify some water or whatever it might be, just having a lighter to sterilize your knife. In a first aid scenario, start a fire. Keep warm because it's just absolutely raining, and dry your clothes out because things have gone just way out of control. Whatever it might be, having that little lighter, I use a mini Bic more often than not, in your backpack can save the day. Speaking of purifying water, I have lost a handful of water filters that have just broken or been damaged, rolled off of a cliff, or just a day hike that went really, really way too long. I keep these aqua tabs in my backpack. This does about 10 liters of water. It's extraordinarily light. It's inexpensive. And when the day gets a little bit weird, this can bail you out. This is my backup plan to my water filter on through hikes and multi-day backpacking trips. And when I get lost, inevitably, on a day hike, I can get into a pretty sketchy water source and use this to purify the water. I won't get giardia, and then I can sort out the rest of my day or night or whatever it might be. But this just lives in my bag. It's super small. It's like very basic first aid, very basic emergency survival things. These aqua tabs have saved me numerous times. So get yourself a packet of those, throw them in the backpack. Next thing is a headlamp. I'm that guy every day hike. Who's got a headlamp? Everybody bring a headlamp, no matter what. Bring a headlamp with you. It could be rechargeable. It could have batteries. It could be whatever it is. In the case scenario that things get a little bit sideways, I have this headlamp that I have found myself on day hikes or really multi-days that didn't really go as planned, where I get lost or somebody gets sick, the day is delayed for some reason or another, and we turn to this headlamp and we start using it for various things. If you are navigating on your phone and you're lost and you're using more battery than you normally would, having a headlamp to rely on, especially on a biking trip when your headlight dies for your bike, or you're just trying to set up camp in the dark or find the trail in some crazy bushwhacking scenario, having a headlamp to bail you out is key, and it saved me multiple times. So I'm that guy. Next time you're on a day hike, just do a show of hands how many people brought a headlamp with them. It's not enough, I can tell you that much. And the last item I'm pretty weird about is bringing a rain jacket on every single trip. It's that extra layer if it's really windy or cold, or if you fall into a river, or if you get lost, or whatever it might be. Not only is another layer, you can use it as a blanket if someone is sick or hurt on the ground. If they don't know where they are because they have hypothermia, you can wrap them up in this thing. You could use an emergency blanket, you could use whatever, but a rain jacket has so many different functions. You never know when the rain's going to really pick up, or if it's going to hail or snow, especially if you're in the Continental Divide back in the United States. Having a rain jacket in your bag, I have this super light one made for runners, made by Outdoor Research. It's their helium rain jacket. It weighs virtually nothing. Just keep it in your bag. It's a safety thing. Maybe an emergency poncho, maybe even an emergency blanket, something along those lines to protect you in the event of a storm. I could build a small and horrible shelter out of a rain jacket, but it's a shelter nonetheless. And I can light a fire and use my knife, and all of these things work together into a bit of a survival scenario. If things start getting out of control, these are the items that I turn to bail me out in a scenario that I'm very uncomfortable in to begin with. And things aren't going to be great. But if I'm missing one of those items, the chances are I'm going to struggle through the night. I'm going to maybe make decisions that might put myself or the group in jeopardy without being able to break a legitimate camp. As always, when you're getting into the backcountry, you should be as safe as possible, be as prepared as possible, and do your research. But we all know that sometimes things get crazy. You get lost, someone gets sick, someone gets hurt, whatever it might be. A normal trip turns into an epic, and it's usually weather related. It's usually decision making related. It's usually hypothermia that's taking people out in the backcountry. And these are the things that if you know how to use them properly and you have them with you, you can save yourself. Without fail, I put these things into my backpack. I use them, and if you are getting into some really strange stuff, you might want to go the PLB route. You might definitely want to bring an emergency blanket. You might want to bring a bigger first aid kit. You might want to bring all these other little things. So those are the 6 things that live in every single backcountry bag that I have. I transfer them from one to the next. They weigh 270 grams combined, and it's worth its weight in gold. I'm telling you, when things start getting out of hand. And maybe you're lucky and you've never been in a scenario like this. I wish that was my experience. But over the years, day hikes turn into multi-day hikes, and multi-day hikes turn into just some type of epic that I've had stories. So what's something that lives in your backpack? What never comes out? I want to know. What do you keep in there for safety or emergency or whatever it might be? Tell me in the comments below. what just lives in your backpack at all times? I'm very curious. But those are the 6 things: day hike, through hike, weekender, bike packing, bike touring, canoe trip, rafting trip. They come with me no matter what. Unless I have multiple contingencies in place to cover me, those are the things that I need the most when things go wrong.